Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from the UK. Last week I shared this card. It's called a theatre card, which when you open it, it opens like curtains at a theatre, hence the name. So I thought it would be fun to recreate this today just to show you how it's made, because there are a few sort of mechanisms and things that you sort of need to know to actually get it to work. So I thought it'd be a fun sort of project, but I'm going to make it in some different papers and different designs this time. So I'm going to be making a Christmas version using our lovely stamp set Happy Holidays. So I have pre-prepared most of the stuff because I wanted to concentrate on the mechanism rather than the actual decoration. So I've pre-prepared most stuff so that I can show you that. So let's get going. So I'll probably be pulling in the original one from time to time just to explain to you what parts are which. But we're going to start first of all with the front of our card. Now you can make this out of a thin board, but I'm going to be making it out of our cardstock here. So I'm using crumb cake and I have two pieces which measure 14.85 centimetres by 10.5 centimetres, and they're simply just going to be glued together to make that front just that little bit stronger. I'm then going to take a piece of in this case very vanilla, but on the original here I used DSP. So if you want it to cover the whole area like the original, then this is also 14.85 by 10.5 high. But what I decided to do this time is to give myself a little border. So I've just cut it 0.5 centimetre shorter on the two sides. So it's 14.35 by 10. So it's entirely up to you which way you want to do that. So I'm just going to start by actually gluing these three pieces together. Now what I want to concentrate on is the edges, because the actual center of this is going to be cut out in a little while. So just make sure that the edges are going to be stuck down nicely. So as I say, this is purely for strengthening this double layer of card. If you wanted to, you could use the backing boards out of our DSP packets, the white one that's that sort of thinner paper or card I should say. Just be careful because obviously it has a shiny side and you just want to make sure that you have a nice firm base. I've got a little bit too much glue squeezed out there, so let's just wipe that away. Okay, so this is our frame. So this is the section at the front. So it's this pink frame here. Now on the original, I used our stitched rectangle dies and I used the 6th size. So if you count from the middle, it's the 6th largest of those. But this time I'm actually going to cut it by hand, because if you haven't got the rectangles, I want to show you how you can also do it just as easy by using a knife and a ruler. So first thing I want to do is to grab myself my knife and a pencil and ruler, and what I want to do is I'm actually going to work on it from the back because we don't see that. So I want to measure 1.5 centimetres in from either end. As I say, we're not going to see this back, so it's better that we do it from this way. So I'm just literally just drawing a rectangle onto here. Okay, and I'm going to make the top and bottom just a centimetre, just to give it that sort of more of a sort of theatrical kind of look to it, rather than it be like an even border all the way round. And you'll also find that the if you're using the rectangle dies, they do actually have a smaller top and bottom than they do on the sides, so this works really well. Okay, so now that I have cut that out, what I want to do is to actually drawn it out. I now want to actually cut it out. So I'm going to use my knife and ruler. Now just remember that you're going through a few layers, so rather than use too much pressure on your knife, don't be afraid to sort of cut it 2 or 3 times just to make sure you're going through. Okay, so that is our front piece done. I can see I've got a very slightly wonky edge here, so I'm just going to take my pair of scissors and just trim that out. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to find my center point of the end. So this time it was 10.5 centimeters, so I want to go to 5.25, and I'm just going to mark very lightly with a pencil. I'm then going to take just a small circle punch, and what I'm going to do is just to pop out those ends. So these are these little half moons which enable us to grip hold of the sides. Okay, so that is our little front piece done. So now what I want to do is I want to concentrate on these 2 side sections here. So these 2 measure 14.85 long by 10 high. So they're just slightly narrower than the actual frame because we want them to be able to slide in and out of that. So just to repeat, you need 2 pieces that are 14.85 by 10. And you want to score them at 3.7 and 7.4. So if I've already pre-done mine, and these I have done from thick Very Vanilla. So whereas I used thin on the front of my card, I want to use thick Very Vanilla for these sections. Okay, so I'm just going to move this one, the frame, out of the way just for a moment so we don't get confused. So if you can see these pieces here, this is in fact your curtain. So this is sat in that position once it's into your card, okay? So just so you're aware of sort of where that is. If you want to cover this with DSP, which of course you can, this is 10 centimeters high by 7.4 centimeters across. And of course, if you wanted to use a border, you would just cut it very slightly smaller. Okay, so these pieces, as I say, are going to go opposite. So they're going to be looking like that once they're stuck down onto your card. So what we want to do is we want to create and cut a little slit just here, which will enable us to put this centre bar across, and it will also stop the actual curtains from opening too far. So if you have them in this position, and so they are actually back to back, or they're actually the fronts are together and you're showing the back side of these. So what I want to do is I want to mark a point. Now this little slit that we're going to cut is going to be 3 centimeters high and just a couple of mils across. So I want to cut this. If you can imagine, this is your actual card piece, sorry, beg your pardon, that way. We want to cut it just here. So I'm actually going to measure just one to show you first, because I think it will be easier to understand. So we've got our 3.7 centimeter score line, and this one is our 7.4. So I want to measure up about 1 centimeter from the bottom. So 1 centimeter from the bottom here. And I want to also mark another point at 4 centimeters. Okay, so that is the length of my little slit. Now I'm not going to measure this. So what I want to do is just to cut just a few millimeters away from that edge. You don't want to be too close from that first score line. And I'm going to cut one line where my mark is, and then I'm just going to move my ruler across a couple of mil, and I'm going to cut another one. Okay, now I have gone a little bit further than my pencil marks, if you can see, and that's purely to make it easier to slide in and out. You don't want it to be too tight. So I'm going to cut that little slit out, and there you can see I've just cut one piece. So if we can imagine now, this is my right hand side of my card. What I need to do is I need to duplicate this on the other side. So these are our curtains, and I need to duplicate this little slit we have here on this edge. I'm just going to make sure it's folded nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop them together as if they were on the front of my card. Just make sure these edges are nice and neat, and then I'm going to mark where the slit needs to go. Okay, so once again I'm just going to repeat that. Either side of this mark I'm just going to cut a little slit. Okay, so these will now sit opposite each other, and you'll have that little slit there, and the bar is going to go through that. Okay, so now that's all in place, we want to decorate slightly. So I'm going to take another piece of cardstock, and this time it's crumb cake again, and this is going to be the back of my card. So once again, this is 14.85 centimetres by 10.5 centimetres high. And what I want to decorate is this very back section and also these side panels here. So I'm going to start with my back panel, and I've taken some paper from the Meadow Suite. So this is called, if you bear with me, this is called the Harvest Meadow DSP. So this is just one of the patterns in there, and I thought it just went really nicely with this card design. And I want to stick this in the centre. I don't need to measure it properly. Just make sure I've got a similar border top and bottom and a similar gap either side, because this is going, the edges of it will be covered by our mechanism in a moment. So I'm going to stick that down first. As I say, don't worry if it isn't quite central. Get it as central as you can, and just for measurement purposes, that is 10 centimetres by 8.5 centimetres. Okay, so now that is in place, what I want to do is to cover these two sections where I've done the slits. Now it does mean that I need to cut the slits again, but what it is, it's better to do it that way rather than trying to go through so many layers. So I've got two little pieces of DSP matching, and it's going to sit on these sections here, and then I'm just going to cut the slit through again. So I do actually want to make sure that it's glued down nice and firm, especially around where that little slit is, because we don't want it to pop off at that point. So just concentrate on giving it a nice covering. Okay, and this one measures 10 centimetres by 3.7 centimetres. So it's just enough. Just go up to that score line. If you find you have a little edge just poking over here, you might just want to take a pair of scissors to it. It just depends on where your score lines are. So don't worry if you've got a little bit of an overhang at that point. That's one, and let's do the other one. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that they're stuck nicely, and then again I'm just going to take my knife. I don't need to worry about my ruler this time, just using the edge of that card. You can just pop the slit through to the back. So now those sections are done, so we can start putting our card together. Okay, so again, you just need to make sure that the slits are on that lower section. Okay, I'm going to bring in my base piece. So this is the back. And I want to glue on this very first section here. So I'm just going to glue onto here. And I want to line up the edge with the edge of my base card. And I want the rest of it to be in line with my DSP. So just make sure it's in line with that edge and your DSP. So that's your first piece in place. And then I'm going to do the same with the other side. And I'm going to do the same thing. Just make sure it's level with that side. Close it down just to make sure it's level with my DSP. Move it around if you need to. And open that up. So there you can see you have got what is starting to be your curtain area, okay? So the next thing I want to do, if you are decorating your front, you could decorate it now, but what you do need to be aware of is that part of it is covered when it's closed. So this is how it will look when it's closed. So obviously you don't want to decorate too much onto these outer sections because you're not going to really see them unless you've got some particular sort of design in mind. I have got a little design in mind. So what I'm going to do is on the very edge of mine, I've just cut a strip of the same patterned paper just to coordinate it all together. And this is 1.5 centimetres across by 10 centimetres high. Now on the original, if I bring that through, you can see I actually stuck DSP all over it. So it's entirely up to you how you decorate. What is more important is that we get the mechanisms working. So I've stuck this on here because I'm going to see this through my little sort of half moons that I've made here. Okay, so they're just stuck in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put a greeting across here in a little while. Just make sure they're nice and straight. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my frame back in. And this time I want to cut 2 pieces of crumb cake cardstock or whatever your frame is made from. So it's 14.5 centimetres long by 1.5 centimetres, as I say, and then you're going to score at 2 centimetres on either end, and you need 2 of those. So I'm just going to turn over my frame, and I want to attach these with the little tabs either end of my frame. Okay, so if you find that this is just a little bit too long, don't worry, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that this isn't a really tight fit. Okay, we want to make sure that we've got a little bit of movement in here to pop our curtains through. So don't worry if they look a bit too long, they're not going to show and it won't be a problem. Okay, so I'm just gluing onto those tabs, and I want to stick those one either end of my frame, and as I say, just balance it in the middle, but you're going to leave it so that it has this natural sort of opening because we want it to have some movement in it. Okay, now of course you will notice at this point that your half moon is now covered in here. Now I like to trim that off as well. The reason being is because otherwise you have a tendency to grip hold of the back as well as the actual frame. So I prefer to do that. So if I take my second piece, so mine is a little bit wide, but what I've done is I've just adjusted mine. I think what I might have done is just scored slightly a millimetre out on these, but it doesn't matter because they're not going to show. If you make sure that any little piece that may overhang just very slightly goes towards the bottom, you're not going to see that. And don't worry too much if you get a piece through here that you see a little bit, because that's going to be covered by your actual curtains, so don't worry about that. So I'm just going to pop that half moon out again. So that is my frame. Okay, so now what we want to do is to put it all together. So very carefully, what I'm going to do, actually no, we'll put the bar in first. I'll show you the bar because that's the bit that you need to be aware of. So this measures 9.5 centimetres by 3 centimetres wide. And then I have got 4 little 0.5 millimetre strips here in the same colour, which are just a centimetre wider. So these are 4 centimetres long by 0.5 centimetres wide. And I want to stick these to one end of my bar. And just for strength, I'm going to stick another one over the top. Okay, so this is acting as a little stopper. So I'm going to pop this through one of my slits, going through the middle, and then you'll see when it gets to this point, it won't go any further because the stopper will actually stop it going. Okay, and then going to pop this one through the slit the other side, and I want to do the same again. So I'm putting a stopper on the other end. Don't be tempted to stick both stoppers at the first time because you will then not be able to get it through your slits. Ask me how I know. Yes, I did. I did stick both of mine on without thinking. So just be aware of that. Not the end of the world because you can always cut another couple of bits of card just to make your actual stopper. Okay, so you'll see that this piece will actually just stop it from moving too far out. Okay, that is now done. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to pop through this little gap that we've made here. So through here, I'm going to feed one of my curtains. Okay, and I'm going to put it through quite a long way. You don't need to put it all the way through, but what I want to is just to give myself enough to play with so that I can pop it back through the other side. Okay, so as you can see, this is now your theatre card. It takes a little while just to fold everything to fold into place. Just make sure that all your score lines are nice and sharp because that can sort of affect the movement of it slightly. So I should have done that a little bit before, but it's fine. It's not a problem. I'm just going to make sure all my score lines are really, really nice and tight. And say push it inside, make sure it sort of fits inside for you. Line it all up and then just make sure that all your score lines are nice and sharp. Okay, so this is your theatre card here. Now, as you can see, you only see these clear sections in the middle and you have very small sort of limited on the sides. So you don't want to be decorating. I find it easier to decorate this after I'm done. Okay, so I'm going to open mine up. So as you can see, this will sit on someone's side really nicely. And again, these will get better as time goes on. You'll find that they'll start staying in place. So just play around with them a little bit if they don't quite stay in place to start with. And now I'm going to decorate. So I have chosen the Happy Holiday, as I say. So I have decorated this little robin, which is just about going to fit in here. He will fit inside, but what you don't want to do is to put too much decoration too much next to these sliding parts. So he's fine because these parts don't slide, but the bottom section you just need to make sure. So I'm going to pop him just on that bottom piece. Now I have painted him using watercolour pencils just onto some of our Fluid 100 paper, and I used a blender pen just to blend his colour through. Really nice and simple. I've also done some little pieces of holly. So again, I just need to be careful that he's not going to get stuck on them. So I just want to make sure that I give it a nice glue. And these were done exactly the same way with the watercolour pencils. I just want to make sure that this sticks nicely onto that bar. So notice I'm just popping my bone folder under there just to give me a little bit of resistance to press the holly down. And just make sure obviously as well that it's not going to get caught, and no, that's absolutely fine. So that's my little robin. I might add a little bit more holly there in a second. As I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a greeting across this middle, which I'm going to cut in half so that it sort of is half and half onto it, which I will do afterwards. But what I wanted to point out to you was to not be tempted to use things like dimensionals and things like that on the actual movements, because otherwise they will get stuck. So you don't want something on dimensionals here, because that's going to be too thick for it to move through the windows. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Don't use things like our adhesive jewels and things like that, because they will have exactly the same effect on your page. So that doesn't mean to say you can't decorate, and I am going to add a little bit of decoration, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it onto the outside of my frame. So these are going to go like this, if I can find the right way around. That looks quite nice. So I'm going to pop these onto here, and I'm going to put my greeting in the middle. So let's stick those down first, and again it's just on these 3 leaves. So just be careful where you stick your glue. So you can decorate your frame okay, but just don't decorate the centre part too much. Okay, so now you can see this is our finished card. What I've done is I've just literally cut a greeting in half, which I've cut actually down the middle of the words, which does take it slightly off center, but it actually looked better than trying to cut the word in half. So I'm not too worried about that. It's marginal, so I think it's sort of the way the holly leaves and things fall, it's absolutely fine. And I've added a linen bow to the top. So if I open my card now, there you can see is my little robin. So I hope you like that today. It's just a little bit of fun, something a little bit different for to add to our crafting sort of catalogue, so to speak. So I hope you like it, and we'll give it a go. Bye.